welcome to everybody. I want to introduce you to the panel because they are an eclectic group of experts that are phenomenal in their fields, and I'd like to welcome each and every one. And first of all, we have Amanda. Amanda's a sales growth expert, and she's going to help us make the most of sales through these challenging times. And then we're going to have Sarah Sangster, digital marketing expert. What Sarah doesn't know about digital marketing, nobody knows. She's absolutely phenomenal. And then very, very big welcome to Greta, the journalist. She's a published author. She's a guest lecturer at the City University in London, and she's written for Forbes as well. And she's also a life coach, and she's going to help us with our creativity. We've got Joe, who's going to help us with our physical well-being, and keeping in physical shape at the moment is absolutely key, isn't it? And then we've got Olly back again. Olly, former officer in the British Army. He's been on an amazing personal journey, and he's here, and he's going to help us be resilient and look after our own mental health and fitness. And then I'm going to have a little session as well, and share my 3 top tips. And then I'm going to be followed by Andy, an absolute IT whiz. But what's really interesting about Andy is that he's also been a marketing director. So he comes at IT from a very practical place. And then we've got Tory. Tory's worked non-stop throughout this entire time to help as many businesses as she can. She's an accountant. She specialises in family businesses. And a huge welcome back to Tory. Followed by Nicki. Nicki is worth her weight in gold, literally. She helps people look after their T's and C's and their cash flow, and she is absolutely amazing. Always brings huge value. So welcome back, Nicki. And then we've got Carolyne as well. Caroline's going to help us understand what we need to do to look after our staff and our sort of wider community to keep them on board, keep them motivated. Obviously quite challenging in these times. And then we've got George Swift. So pleased to have George back. George is going to share all sorts of valuable things. He always does. Absolutely brilliant mindset, attitude, absolutely key right now. So thank you to all of the panel for coming back to be here today. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. And there we go. Back. So this session is being recorded. As I said, do jump in with any questions or say hello in the chat. But actually, I want to just put things into context a little bit first of all. George did this a few weeks ago at a great session. It really struck me. Do you know there are, in 2020, there were 6 million businesses in the private sector. 1.4 million of those had employees, 4.6 million did not. And between the year 2000 and 2020, the business population increased by 72%. And that shows how phenomenally important businesses are to our economy. Absolutely key to also understand that actually when you start a business, it's often and in my experience invariably because you want to make a difference. So it's really, really, really key time for small businesses now to pull together, help each other, and that's what the whole ethos of Stronger Together is all about. So putting it into context like that, you can see how big the whole business community is. Now, the reason for doing this webinar now was because I wanted to help businesses prepare to go into a recession. Little did I know that when I started organising it, we'd be going into lockdown number 2. So it feels as though we still do need to prepare ourselves for a recession, make the most of what we've got, with this added complication, if you like, of this lockdown. Of course, people are talking about further lockdowns as well. So the Harvard Business Review did a really, really interesting report. It's fairly old now, but it talks about recession. It's called Roaring Out of Recession, and Lucy's going to put the link to the report in the chat. But 17% of businesses they found did not survive. 80% of businesses they studied survived, but it took them 3 years to get back to pre-recession sales and profit growth rates. 80%, huge. But 9% came out better. So focusing on those 9%, why did those 9%? Well, it's key. Everybody's strategy is different, the business strategy is different, but the common factor was that they balanced between cutting costs and investing to grow their turnover in the future. So this whole session is about positivity, it's about top tips to make the most of the rest of 2020. It's also about finding ways to thrive into 2021. Okay, so all of that puts it into context. Sales clearly are the lifeblood of a business. And what we're going to do with this session is we're going to come from the inside out, if you like. We're going to start with sales, absolutely key. And that's why I'm so pleased that Amanda is with us today. Welcome, Amanda. Handing over to you.
Unmuted, fabulous. Thank you very much. Thank you. I've got 3 tips for you today, and they come from listening and speaking to, I mean, literally hundreds of salespeople in the last few months. And my 3 tips are actually, they might provoke you a little bit, but I make no apologies for that. It might surprise you to know that the salespeople we've spoken to, and particularly their sales managers, and we're all business owners, so if we're talking to ourselves here, is that many people are still fearful of selling virtually. They are fearful of this environment, which we have to work with at the moment. We have no choice. And they're fearful of making the wrong impression on customers. So my very first tip actually is to embrace the virtual sell. Embrace it however you need to for your customers. But I'm just going to give you a few tips. The first is find a hook. And I'm using a background. There are many other types of hooks that you can use. Find a background that is going to allow you to have a hook. What I mean by a hook is a theme that is just going to wake up your customers. One of our speakers this morning at a session I was running calls it zombie Zoom face. We must get into a position where we stop in the zombie Zoom face. I'm looking at you guys now. I'm looking at my panelists even. What exactly is your impact online? Please, can you practice your body language? Practice using as much expression as you can, and practice waking up your customers from zombie Zoom face. Practice the technology if you need to. Prepare and be ready so that actually it's worth them listening. We are all the time on these things. You need to make sure that you're avoiding the zombie Zoom face. Practice if you need to. That's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to say is ask brilliant questions about 2021 when you get in hold of a customer. Ask great questions, not closed questions like, are you all right? And, do you need more sales, or do you need any orders, or, do you need me to do anything for you? Really great open questions that allow your customers to tell their stories. So ask a question like, what do you think your main challenges have been in the last 8 months? Where do you expect to put most of your time in the next quarter? And really, really listen to what their stories they're telling you. One of our speakers called it story listening, by asking a great question, because as soon as you start to hear your customers' stories, you'll be able to understand where their needs are, and then thinking about how you're going to match your sales, your pitch, or how you're going to help them to what they're saying. So ask great questions, open questions with a really, really specific insert: main, most, top 3, least, worst, best, all of those inserts, which we talked about in a previous session. I'm going to say one more thing, and that is, I'm going to move so you can see it. Kind of get the idea. Find a way to celebrate with your customers. Find a way to share your successes. Find a way to share their successes. If you can, send them something in the post. If you can't, make sure that you personally email and message them and get hold of them to do that. Send them a little video, a little video with a background like this, which may not be your style, but what we're looking for is cut through. We're looking for cut through so that they choose your face to look at when they open their emails and not other people's. And ideally, when you do ring and say, have you got 5 minutes to talk about next year, they will answer. If you celebrate what you've done in the last year, then people will want to know, because we're all really, really keen and loyal to our preferred suppliers. So make sure that you find a way to celebrate with them. They are my top tips. That's the first time I've used Zoom backgrounds. I don't know whether that worked or not. Please give me feedback. My guy this morning said don't use them. So, hey, we've all got to try these provocative things. I really do, though, provoke you to get hold of your customers, share what you've been doing, and to celebrate with them. So, Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much. Brilliant. I love that. Avoid a zombie Zoom face. Absolutely brilliant. So really, really good tips there from Amanda. Thank you. And we're moving on now to Sarah. So Sarah is a digital marketing expert, and digital marketing has, just become more and more and more important as we've gone on, but none more so really than in the last few months when face-to-face opportunities have been reduced. There's all sorts of noise out there on digital marketing. There's all sorts of things you can use, and it can be mind-boggling, really and truly. It's moving at a very fast pace as well, and the temptation is sometimes just to try something and then, you just find out that you're wasting time. So ultimately, we need to be visible out there in any way that we can, so that we can actually be encouraging people to us, so that we can then feed our pipeline and start talking to new people, etc. And Sarah is an absolute expert at this. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. It is noisy out there, and I'm speaking to so many businesses that actually most of them have never had to do proper marketing before, because it's come easy to them. They've been long established businesses, but now more than ever they're needing to get into the thick of things. So my 3 tips plus one little extra today is all about being organised and planning out your marketing. If you don't have a business plan, if you don't have a marketing plan, obviously that's the place where you need to start, but it has to be your social media and your digital marketing has to be weaved into that. It can't be something that is completely separate. It must be integral in everything that you do. So my first tip is to plan it out. Take some time to really think about your content and what you're going to do, and making sure you're not just doing it for the sake of it, but it is leading to something, because, there's lots of noise out there, but we just need to make sure that when you do post something, that it is cutting through and it is going to be making an impact. The second tip is to use the right tools. So many people are still using stuff that is really old-fashioned, or they're using stuff that doesn't make them work smart. Things like Canva, where you can create once and resize it multiple times, have different effects, or have animated. Canva is my absolutely favourite tip. If anyone's ever heard me talk before, I use Canva for everything. You can now schedule directly from Canva now as well. So really start thinking about using the right tools. If I had just a couple that I would pick, if I had nothing else to use, it would be, I'd keep with my Facebook and Instagram as my top one. My creation tip would be Canva. And I can do everything. I can run everything from that. So that's the ones that I'd use. The third tip is to batch create. Now, when we come up with the ideas, we are doing one thing. When we're creating something, we're using a different part of our brain. When we're then scheduling it and doing the analytical stuff, we're using a different part of our brain again. So where possible, create things in a way that you are batch creating, so you're not jumping from one thing to the other and actually not using your time the best way that you can. And then my final tip, and this is a real key one for most people that I'm talking to, is the question about whether you should schedule your content or whether you should take it with you. Now, most of us are sitting at home or sitting in our offices, and we're on our computers all the time. We're not getting out there as much as we could be. Now, we can obviously go out and walk, we can go and meet up with people and go and have a conversation. But think about how you can take your content with you. So everything is on my phone. So I've got all my apps on my phone, all my content on my photos. I can record things on my phone. I can video on my phone. I can do a podcast on my phone. So where you can, be creative with taking your content with you. So create on the go, post on the go, sit on a park bench and just get, some fresh air and actually create your marketing with, take it with you. And then you've got the choice of whether you can schedule it. So, create it all and then come back and schedule it all, or actually think, do you know what? I want to be more reactive. I want to put more stories out there. I want to be more documentative with my marketing. So I'm going to load my phone up. I'm going to put all my images, all my graphics, everything on my phone. And when I feel like it, when I've got that moment of inspiration, I'm going to look through my videos. I'm going to look through my notes. I'm going to look through my photos, and I'm going to start to create some amazing social media, some digital marketing in the moment, because I've taken it with me. And sometimes, those of you know, I do lots of stuff at the stables because we've got a horse, and so sometimes I'll be watching the girls ride, and I'll be just doing a little bit of marketing because I've got an inspiration to come to me, or I'll say something that I'll be like, oh, I should really share that with my followers, so I can quickly look at what videos or images I've got or notes I've got and create something of the moment, and it comes across in the posts that I'm doing because it feels real. So don't over create, but live in the moment with your documents. So that is my 3+1 tips.
Thank you, Sarah. Love that. And I love Canva as well. It's phenomenal, isn't it? And the professional version is really does add that extra value. So it's worth upgrading if you are using the free version of Canva at the moment. But I love that planning and marketing to, of course, underpin the overall business plan. And the tendency is to sort of have them as separate, and of course they can't be. They do have to. One has to support the other. So excellent. Thank you so much. And we touched on creativity there with Sarah. So it's absolutely ideal that Greta is going to be sharing her ways of unblocking creativity and. Greta has a degree in psychology and is a published author, but is focusing a lot on creativity. And sometimes we can get a little bit stuck, can't we? Either with our content or how we can take product to market or how to innovate. And some of these creativity tips actually help us do all of those things. So Greta, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Julia. It's wonderful to be here. So I'm going to share some tips about unblocking your creativity, as you just said, but I just kind of want to put it into context as to why I had to do this for myself in the first place. And this is going back 20 years when it was my second magazine job as a features writer at one of the top selling weekly magazines in the UK. So this was the dream job. I was going out doing interviews, like talking to celebrities, doing lots of really amazing things. But actually getting the writing done was done under a lot of stress and pressure. And I had this kind of writing personality where I would leave everything to the last minute and only be able to get my writing done under that kind of very forceful way. And of course, I didn't work that well in the magazine where you had these really tight deadlines. And there was one day when I was sort of distracted by something else that was completely not related to work. And I was thinking, well, how am I going to get my piece done today? I have to, submit this piece by the deadline this afternoon. And I was able to access this other part of my creativity to go into a different zone. And it really flowed and it was really easy. And I realized that actually there is a way to create and be in that flow. And for me, for my lifestyle, I decided to go freelance as a journalist. And I kind of went unblocking my creativity. And there were two things that I did, which lead into my 3 points. The first thing I did was train at drama school, and I trained at drama school evenings and weekends while working freelance. And it was all about very much getting in the body, about moving. And, the teacher would say, take your shoes off, take your heels off, you have to be grounded and feel yourself in order to create and be creative. And the second thing I did was I studied lyric writing at Berklee College of Music. And we learned a technique there called object writing, where you're focusing on your senses. And that enabled me to get past all the sort of fear mindset that I was running while I was had been working in writing. And that enabled me to create song lyrics really freely and easily. And this is how I came to this work, by teaching, first of all, students all these unblocking techniques I'd learned from lyric writing and everything I'd learned. And that's my work today, teaching people how to unblock. And so my 3 tips. So the first thing you can do if you are feeling blocked and stifled is to understand that your creativity does need a container. So for me, that's writing. And I really highly recommend implementing some kind of writing practice. And the first tip is to understand that there are different parts of the body and brain that you can communicate from. So my model is the communication pyramid, where you have at the top you have the mind. And so for writing, that would be things like your grammar rules, your hacks, your structure, all those kind of things you've been taught at school. Second down, you have the body, and that's actual practical techniques. Sort of like if you went on a writing course, you'd learn sort of body techniques. And underneath that, you have the heart. That's the stories you tell, your feelings, what your unique message is, what you really communicate. Underneath that, you have the soul. That's why you're writing what you're writing, what it means to you. And under that is your voice. And it's really important to understand that when you're stuck in the mind, it's really, really hard to create. And so you want to get into that heart space. And some really quick ways to get into the heart space are to move your body, to get in the body. So things like, I always tell my clients to make a big spaghetti bolognese, chop up vegetables, things that get you moving, things that get you sweating, things like driving, showering. And so that this moves on to the second tip that I have, is a really simple thing you can do to implement for you and your business as a business owner is to start walking and writing. So you want to be getting out of the mind as much as possible, and to understand that your writing and creativity comes from the body. And as you're walking and moving and striding out in the world, that allows your thoughts to bubble down more into the body and to flow a bit more easily. So something you can do is I recommend going for like a 15-minute walk, taking your smartphone or taking a notebook and actually focusing on your senses. Focus on what you can see, what you can hear, what you can touch. If you're drinking something or eating something, what you taste, how your body feels, and the actual movement that you're making. And actually just focus, look around and write whatever comes into your head. Anything at all, no matter how small or big. Write down whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, or go with an intention that day. So you've got a problem that you want to solve, or there's something that's really bugging you. Put that intention, go for your walk, and just write down what's bubbling up for you. And that's a really good way of actually trying to get your writing and creativity more grounded, that you're not sitting at your desk worrying and being anxious. We really want to keep moving and keep in the body. I'm not sure how long I've had, but I think I've got 1 more minute maybe. So I'm going to just talk about keeping your creative center with all the negative opinions, all the craziness that's happening right now. And I think one of the best things to do is to understand that everybody has their own truth. And so you have to keep connected to what your truth is. And I think it's really important when you are trying to be more creative is to start the day with you. So don't start the day with the news, or start the day by looking and seeing what someone else thinks. It's about starting off and thinking what you think, what you feel, how you, your intention for the day. And always keeping a pen. I think I've had many tips now, I'm very sorry, but always keeping a pen and paper by your side, or your notebook, and making sure that as you go about your day, that you are keeping your thoughts for you and making them important, so that whatever comes into your mind, whatever creativity ideas, whatever happens in you that you think is important, that you're recording it, you're writing it down, and you're training yourself to think, my creativity is important, what I think is important, what I believe is important. And that helps you to connect to yourself. so that you can retain a bit of centre when the world is obviously trying to knock us off balance in these times. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greta. Gosh, loads of tips. Thank you. I love that, starting the day with you. The tendency is, isn't it, just to switch on the phone, have a look, see what's going on in the world, and it's all such negativity. And when you're in that fear mindset, as you said, it's so difficult, isn't it, to be creative? It paralyzes you. It's just so hard, and then you have to make that very concerted effort to get out of the fear into the positive place again. So I love that. And also going for a walk, that always helps me. I always think when I'm walking, and ideas just pop into your head, and that physical exercise or that physical doing something, as you said, the chopping up the vegetables, it removes the limits that we put on ourselves, doesn't it, so that we can let those creative ideas flow. Thank you so much. And the other thing I think that that sort of suppresses that creativity is when we're not feeling too good. And, you know, physically, when we're feeling physically drained, fatigued, and that's what I'm hearing a lot of people saying, that they're feeling fatigued. It's not just about the Zoom fatigue, it's fatigue in general. And on the last couple of webinars, there was lots of talk both from Olly and Joe about having a routine. It would be a new routine because we weren't allowed out, of course, at that time, but it's about having that routine. And when you're in a physical, when you're feeling well physically, then that helps you feel well mentally, and it also helps you feel well emotionally. And when you are feeling well in those three areas, then it enables creativity to flow and for us to bring our best selves to running our businesses, to helping our clients, looking after our families, all sorts of things. So I'm really pleased to have Joe back again. Joe is a wellbeing expert, and Joe's going to share some tips on how we can help ourselves be the best physically that we can.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, it's really important to be looking after ourselves. That's really crucial at all times, but I think particularly at the minute where there's so much going on, everybody can kind of get very focused in on certain things and be working a lot and forget to kind of look after themselves. And the last thing any of us want at the minute is a health problem sneaking up and taking you by surprise and forcing you to do a bit of a full stop on things. So best way to be, I would say, get thriving and stuff at the minute is really just to be looking after yourself. And there's a few things that you can really do at the moment. First one I would say is vitamin D. So I've mentioned this before, is that something that's really good for your immune systems. One of a few vitamins I've talked about before, but particularly with this time of year, vitamin D is one that's really, really crucial. So much of the time that people are already deficient on that is something that we're low on, and then you hit into winter and we're outside less, particularly at the moment where we're all locked down, might not be getting out as much, even more so than normal this time of year. So that vitamin D can take a real hit, and that has such a big impact on your immune system, coughs and colds and things like that. So getting your vitamin D dose is really good, and it's something that's also been shown to be particularly effective against COVID. So even more so, that's something that you can do to kind of take your help reduce your worries about any of that. They did a study recently on some NHS workers, about 250 of them, and they found high dose vitamin D reduced the infection rate, reduced the chances of contracting COVID by 54%, which is pretty massive. So it's really worth getting your high dose vitamin D on and taking that and sort of seeing the boost with that. And it's also showed to have with people that do contract it have a lot less serious symptoms and less hospitalizations, less high ICU rate, again by sort of 50%. So it's really worth getting that vitamin D in your system as much as possible. It's also something that helps with SAD, seasonal depression, sleep patterns and things like that, getting your sleep cycles and things working a bit better. And again, things like seasonal depression might be something that hits people a bit harder this year because we're not able to get out and do some of the fun things we would normally be able to do. So just having a think, making sure you're getting that in your system. If you want to take it with food source, mushrooms are a really good source, but you do need to be eating them really, really regularly to get that. So I'd recommend a supplement as kind of the easiest way of getting that. Taking that for at least a month is a really good way to boost your levels. So the next thing I was going to recommend as well, which kind of also helps with vitamin D levels, is getting outside for your exercise, which is great because both Sarah and Greta have also said, get outside, do some work, take it with you. And I completely back that 100%. I think at the minute, a lot of people's routines and things are messed up with the normal exercise that we might do. If you're doing something like normally you go to the gym or go swimming or meet up with friends and do classes, exercise classes and things like that. So much of that has been limited this year, and then even more so in lockdown. So it's really important to get outside and do your exercise and get that circulation going. And then again, it helps with vitamin D, helps with your sleep. Has you a statistic I read recently, which is really interesting, is your healing ability is actually increased 600% by being outside. So getting outside is going to make such a huge difference to you both physically and mentally, that I'd really recommend doing it. And it's obviously at the bit of the minute the weather kind of impacts us. We kind of look at it and go, oh, I don't know about that, but it's good to kind of get outside, even just 5 or 10 minutes, doesn't have to be that long. And then on days when it is nicer, maybe spending a bit more time outside. And luckily this time we can meet people for a social distance walk and things like that, and that's, you know, it's really going to help both mentally and physically doing something like that. We've got a saying in our family as well, which is there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear. So invest in a good raincoat or something like that at the minute and get yourself outside. That's really going to help. And the last thing I would sort of talk about as a good tip would be having to think about your posture. So starting to see coming through now, after people working a lot more from home and getting out a bit less and kind of exercise routine and all these things, is I'm starting to see people come through with getting more neck and back problems and things like this, and that's really going to impact what you can do and how things are. So it's good to have a think about your posture. Obviously when we're in the office, or you know, if we're not working from home, obviously that's changed for a lot of people this year, but in the office you tend to have a good, you know, quite a good chair, sat at the desk. You tend to be thinking a bit more and sat a bit more upright, whereas when you're at home you might be sat on the couch with the laptop in front of you, or sat at an uncomfortable kitchen chair and things like that, and all of that starts to really take its toll and leave you a lot more susceptible to back problems, neck problems. But also with posture, if you're starting to have issues there, you start to see problems with circulation and digestion as well, and things like that can be impacted. So it's really good just to have a think about your setup, and is there something you could do to improve it. It looks like working from home is going to increase whatever happens from now on. So, you know, maybe it's time to invest in a slightly better quality chair or get a footstool, things like that, just to work on your posture. And doing a bit of stretching as well at your desk is really good. I'm going to show you some stretches now that you can do at the desk, which are really, really good ones for getting everything working properly, and particularly working on those areas. So by all means, follow along and do them now if you can. So obviously I'm working on the headphones here, bear with me. So the first one is just stretching your hand over, touching the other ear, and then sit on the other hand, and then just pushing that to the side, and you can really feel that stretching out your neck. And then to stretch out the back part of your neck, bring your head forward, and you can feel that stretch down the back of your neck there. So that's the first one. Obviously make sure when you're doing this that you do it on both sides, and that works your whole back of your neck, which is really good to kind of stretch that whole area out. It stops you getting things like headaches and stuff as well, so that's a good one to try. So the next one, this is really good for, I see this a lot with people that are hunched over keyboards and things, getting knots in the shoulder blades. So working with this is like an eagle arms pose if you do yoga. So crossing your arms over and then bringing your palms together like that, and then lifting the whole thing up, and you can really feel that stretching the back of your shoulder blades out. And that's a really good, it's quite difficult to get to those knots in the back there, and that's a really good one to do to stretch those out. So again, making sure you're doing that on both sides. And then the last one I'll show you is works on rounded shoulders. So obviously again, that's something that we find a lot of people's shoulders come forward, and what happens is you then get the head and neck tilts like that, shoulders tilt and rounded, and this one starts to have really big impact on how you hold yourself and everything. And it's a really good one to make sure you're not having too many problems with that. So with this one, you clasp your hands together but behind your back, so clasping your hands together, stretching them down, and then lift your head up, and you can really feel that stretching out that all the front of your neck into your chest, and then pulling your shoulders backwards as well. That's a really, so all of those three, that focuses a lot on the area, most of the problem areas that we tend to get hunched over keyboards, helps stretch out and opens everything up, and helps you avoid problems like headaches, back problems, neck problems. And it's also great for your circulation and things as well, so it's a good one to look at. It's also really good at the minute to try and, you know, if you can go a bit further with that, do something like a bit of yoga or Pilates. There are some wonderful resources out there now, you know, YouTube, Yoga with Adrienne, there's a bunch of other ones as well. They're all free. You can get on and do the videos to suit your level of ability and your time restraints that you've got, and there's lots of Zoom classes and stuff available as well. So just use just utilize those things, and you've got to think about your well-being and stuff at the minute. And I would say those are good ways to kind of look after yourself. And that's me.
Thank you, Jo. Love that. God, those stretches feel good already, don't they?
You can feel them, can't you?
Such a difference. They really do. That's brilliant. Excellent. Thank you. And I love the tip about the yoga. And actually, I've got some vitamin D. You've got one that sprays into the inside of your mouth, and so you're meant to absorb it more easily. But I think that was the first year I've done it, and it's fascinating to see that percentage increase in the NHS workers. But also amazing, 600%. For being outside. And that's just, I love being outside. I just, whatever the weather, as you say, there's no such thing as bad weather. It's just bad outfit, isn't it? So thank you, Jo. Really, really useful stuff there. And now we're going to move on to Olly. Olly focuses on helping people with their mental fitness and resilience. And Olly has spent a lot of time outside, probably doing some of these stretches when he was in the army. So I'm sure that he can completely support what you're saying about being outside. But having that physical wellness feeds in, doesn't it, Olly, into being mentally fit and resilient as well. So over to you.
Thanks, Julia. So yeah, absolutely. I think what I'm going to say is going to connect not only to what Jo has just been talking about, but also what Greta was talking about before. So this idea of connection. So I think one of the big challenges that we face at the moment to our mental health is that we're facing overload in all sorts of different ways, aren't we? So overload of threat or fear or uncertainty, overload, as a lot of people said earlier, on just information coming at us. Now, understanding that as humans, we're not really designed to be able to deal with all this information. So what I really want to talk about is how we can use 3 key tips to maintain, challenge, and actually exploit that overload. So first of all, keeping connected, balancing levels of activity, and then maintaining some kind of routine. And so, really grateful to Greta for, really fascinating discussion about this idea of keeping connected, and really just expanding on that, frankly. And I think that we need to keep connected to 3 things. First of all, ourselves, at a time where actually, because of uncertainty, fear, what is known as also allostatic load, sort of ongoing low levels of stress, it's very easy to actually get disconnected from ourselves. And we find ourselves in this position where, again, from a completely evolutionary perspective, we are taken out of our growth mode, our ability to make sensible, rational, logical decisions, into protection mode. Okay, so I'll talk more about that later. I think we also need to keep connected to other people. Again, we are almost overly connected, hyper connected at the moment. So I think one of the key themes that probably cuts across all of these is about becoming a bit more selective. It's about becoming a bit more discerning. And, again, understanding that as humans, we're only really designed to know about 100 people. And suddenly we've got thousands of people churning through our lives. How do we find the right people that are going to support us, that are going to inform us, but also actually, crucially at this time, challenge us? So making sure that we are making the time. And that's the point, is we have to make the time. We can't always find the time to keep connected to those right people, and, filter out people who are going to be unhelpful, unsupportive, churning a lot of misinformation out. And then finally, keeping connected to nature. So absolutely, I think, I probably spent too much time outside in the past, but no, I do still enjoy it. And this sort of brings me on to this next point about balancing levels of activity. So you may recall from the last session we did that one of my lockdown goals was to run an ultra marathon, and so training was going pretty well. But one thing I learned from that is that to run the marathon, which is frankly what we're having to do now, isn't it? We're having to run a sort of a metaphorical marathon. We don't know where the end point is. We've actually got to work out when we need to run fast and actually when we need to run slow. And so I actually ended up doing the marathon about a month ago. And, every part of my body was telling me not to do it. This is going to be far too much hard work. But I had a word with myself. I connected back with that original intention, and I got through it. But every checkpoint I got to, I was like, I'm going to give up here. There's a nice warm minibus. I can get back inside. But, actually I connect to myself and say, right, I just want to get to the next checkpoint. And so actually by maintaining and balancing levels of activity, what we give ourselves the ability is to run that marathon. It's not a series of sprints. We get to work the checkpoints. What's the next goal? And that is going to give us a really good opportunity and chance of getting out of that protection mode, the fight or flight, and into growth mode. And so we can start to see what the opportunities are out there rather than the threats. So, and then finally, routine. We talked about overload of uncertainty, huge amount of things out there that we can't control. What we can control is our own routine, what we are doing on a daily basis. And I love that idea of starting with ourselves in the morning. Really, really important, because actually we get to choose. We don't get our subconscious to make decisions for us. And so what we have to do again is to audit our routine. What are we doing on a regular basis, which is good for us? And that ties into Joe's points earlier, and making sure that we put ourselves first at a time where actually we're going to be doing a lot of reacting. How actually can we respond in a conscious, deliberate way? And I would argue that the best way to do that is, for me, it's always been meditation, a degree of mindfulness, so that we can exercise choice. And that's my 5 minutes up.
Thank you, Olly. Wow. Wow, I'm just writing so many notes here. There's so much value from everybody, and I'm loving the way that it's all connecting together. But I love that, the whole concept of being connected, and as you said, Annie, being connected with your original intention. We're sort of protecting ourselves from being blown off course. We've been bombarded, as you say, that overwhelm. It's so easy to get blown off course, isn't it? But actually to keep that original intention. And it's my few minutes now, and actually mine follows on as well. And it's to protect yourself again. So to reiterate what has been said so many times, there is so much negativity. And for me, it's about the fact that when you're in that place of fear, it paralyzes you and you're reacting all the time, and you don't achieve, you don't push through and achieve what you want to achieve. And when you're running a business, it may day to day feel as though you're not getting anywhere. But when you look back and see how far you've come, and when you have a plan to see where you want to get to, you can see that as long as you're on the right trajectory, then you're going to get there. So it's about protecting yourself. And if that means switching off social media for a time and just doing that batch sort of posting, so that you're in the moment, in that zone to do that, then so be it. If it means switching off or having a balanced view from the different news channels, whatever you need to do to protect yourself. But for me, it's about protecting yourself by being physically well, mentally well, and having that routine. And the other reason actually to be in this much more positive headspace is that it has been shown that happy people are actually over 30% more productive. So if you need to justify to yourself why you need to protect yourself, then think of it in that way. You can be more productive when you are in a positive place. And that's why I share a lot of positivity in the different groups, the Stronger Together groups, and now on social media, and then for myself, because when I'm sharing, I'm bringing that message back into myself as well, because sometimes I do have to make that conscious effort to be positive, but I'm aware of that. And so that's the first part of it, isn't it, to actually make an effort and be put yourself consciously on that right path. So being happy, being positive does increase productivity, and I help businesses grow, and it's all about finding ways to help businesses and business owners be more productive, increase revenue, reduce costs. And this is where I was particularly interested in the Harvard Business Review, when it was saying that 9% of businesses actually come out better. Well, what is it that they're doing? The tendency sometimes when we're entering into a difficult period is to cut costs. And I think a lot of people try to do that right at the beginning of the first lockdown. But actually, we can see from the Harvard Business Review and what people are saying that actually can sometimes be a mistake. I think it's really important to invest time and energy into operational efficiencies that encourage revenue increase as well as decrease costs. So still aim for an overall increase in net profit. Think about efficiencies, cut costs if you are doing something that is inefficient, but do invest that time and effort and energy and money potentially into making your own business be more efficient. And the overwhelming view really from people is that when you are paralyzed through fear and just reacting, then you can't be developing your business. And even as a small business owner, anyway, we are in this place where it's feast and famine. So when you're out delivering, it's difficult to be developing your business. So have the right processes and systems in place so that your business is still generating interest, even though you're delivering. Okay, and there are brilliant systems out there. So identify the right process that is efficient, take a step back, review it, and then have a system that supports that being more organized. And we've seen that from various of the other speakers, a number of the other speakers, about being more organized. So have good, robust systems in place that support you. And actually, when you do that, it's like having a clone of your best self. So when you are having a bad day, it's not an unproductive day. When you find that you're not feeling 100%, or perhaps you're even ill, or you're looking after a family member, or actually just things have got on top of you, there are still systems that are carrying on in your business to help take you forward to your end goal. So that's my second. So my first tip is to protect yourself. My second was to invest in tomorrow by having good processes and systems, carry on trying to increase revenue as well as decrease costs. My third tip really is to take that deep breath, consciously reduce that fear element, and actually be productive. It's all about staying out there. It's all about adding value to people. The biggest tip I can give is be consistent, stay visible, be authentic. So this really ties in with going back to the original intention, being true to yourself, what Greta was saying, what Olly was saying, what we're all really saying. Be true to yourself, reconnect with your purpose, be authentic, and add value to people. So that's my third biggest tip, is really be consistent, stay visible, be authentic, and add value. Okay, and now I have to go back to being Fiona Bruce and introducing the next person. So, and that comes on nicely to Andy. So it's great to have these processes and systems in place, but we need that robust IT support. And of course, having robust, reliable IT has never been more important, with us all working at home more than perhaps we have in the past. So Andy, as I introduced him earlier, is very interesting and a phenomenal character because he's worked on both sides of the coin, if you like. So Andy, looking forward to hearing your tips. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. There's no pressure at all then. Firstly, it's great to be back here and see that so many people are here again, having survived that initial impact of what was a sort of COVID catastrophe, you could describe it as, and then managed to even get through the next stage, which was reviving their business and starting to move forward again. And now we're in a position to look ahead and actually create businesses that are going to thrive, that fulfill our ambitions from our businesses that we probably had, this time last year. One thing that hasn't changed much during 2020 is that most people find IT confusing, frustrating, and time-consuming. But it's really interesting to hear. So Olly said, human beings are designed to not absorb large amounts of information and process large amounts of information. But IT, of course, is. That's exactly what it's designed to do. And Julia, you're talking about systems and tools that help take away the effort and the pressure on us as individuals. And of course, a lot of those are IT driven, or at least have an IT element underlying them. So although people do find it frustrating, time consuming, and lots of other expletives that often come out, what's really nice to see is that even on this webinar and outside of it, there are lots of businesses that have been on a 2020 journey with us, and seen that it doesn't have to be that sort of pain and tedious task that we all dislike. So how do you go about looking at IT in a way that isn't quite like that adds value and makes IT a useful resource? And the three themes that we tend to use are, firstly, to consider IT and choose IT on the basis that it needs to keep you connected. Connected is a theme that's run through all of these presentations. And IT is a tool that can sit in the background and keep you connected with your teammates or your customers or your suppliers or everybody who's important in your world. It shouldn't be intrusive. It shouldn't be about IT. It should be about feeling connected, and IT's done the job quietly in the background. The second thing that we can't forget in these times is, of course, we all still have obligations for data protection and data security, if not more than ever, with us all using IT more. So IT needs to play an important role with that. And, ultimately, let's use IT to take the stress away from us. So automation and the themes that have come through, automating the tedious tasks that, let's face it, no one wants to do. No one likes data entry. No one likes entering the same thing into different systems 15 times. That's where we really can see IT help to drive those efficiencies you were talking about, Julia. So my top tips today are designed to basically help people find that starting point of working out what's the right IT look like. It's a minefield out there. There's apps galore. Everyone's telling you that theirs is the best widget or shiniest doodah. So how do you go about it? For most people, the right IT is going to start with three main building blocks. The first building block supports that activity that Amanda opened the webinar with. That's all around sales and managing sales in through your business. So in reality, building block one is going to be some form of CRM system, probably with some form of email marketing capability to go with it. And I won't go into those in detail, but we know Julia lives and breathes that kind of stuff. So that's a really important building block to help us start to drive business forward again. Accounting software is your second building block. This too is going to save you hours of effort, because once it's set up, all your obligations towards HMRC, the government, tax, VAT, are dealt with semi-automatically. It's reduced to approvals and clicks of buttons rather than spreadsheets and calculations. So an accounting system online, Xero, QuickBooks, whichever one suits you. And in fact, that's a really good candidate to go one step further and outsource it completely. Find an accountant who does the Xero or QuickBooks stuff for you and take it off your plate. So with those things covered, the last building block is really to find some kind of cloud-based platform that allows you to manage files, store and share files with colleagues, and look after your email and other communications, which sounds huge, but it's not actually. In real life, for most small businesses, we're talking about Microsoft or Google. And usually, in the world in which we live and the type of business environment most people are on this webinar from, it's going to boil down to Microsoft 365. So once you've got that in place, you've really condensed down the amount of IT that you're using. You've given yourself half a chance to actually manage it and configure it and work well with it. And therefore take IT to do what it does best, manage the tedious rubbish stuff and leave you free to open up with the interesting stuff that we all prefer to do. Julia.
Thank you, Andy. Invaluable tips again, and it's so important, isn't it? Just fascinating when you say about those building blocks, the foundations. It just simplifies IT down to what we need, doesn't it, to support us and our businesses. So thank you for that. And talking about Xero, of course, leads us very nicely on to Tory, who is a Xero certified partner. So do talk to Tory if you're interested in Xero, if you have issues with Xero, etc. I love Xero, it's brilliant. But some of this may take some investment. Some of this infrastructure change may take some investment, and it's really key to be on top of your finances right now. Tory has seen a trend with the businesses that she's seen be successful in this time, haven't you, Tory, with the ones that are actually keeping an eye on their numbers? So over to you.
Thanks so much, Julia. So have you got a lot of feedback on your end? Sorry. Perfect. Okay, I'll keep going. So great. So my top tips today are all going to be based around planning. In our financial world right now, there is an awful lot of uncertainty. We've had all of the COVID uncertainty. We're still in a lot of uncertainty from what the government's going to be doing over the next few months, but we're going to just throw another bomb into that with the B word. Can I even say it? Sorry, Brexit. It is coming, and the 1st of January is going to be a very different landscape for us all. And with this much change going on, I mean, it would have been a bad thing just with the one to deal with, one or the other, both at the same time. It's going to be a bit of a headache. So what I want to talk to you today about is finding a place from which you can plan. It's really about being centered. It seems to be a theme for today, but centered in a sort of financial way. And what I mean by that is that if you've got a grip on your finances, even if everything else on the outside is going crazy, you can come back to those figures. The lovely thing about figures is that they're either right or they're wrong, really. They don't go into an amorphous changing mass. So you can open up your figures if you're keeping them correctly, and you can get some sense of stability and comfort from having a look at those. So my first tip is do your numbers daily. And what I mean by that is to have a system in place, a process in place that means you can open up, and for me it's always Xero, but you may be using QuickBooks or another system, but it needs to be an up-to-date cloud-based accounting system that attaches into your bank. Those are your real minimums these days for a decent way of running a business. So get into the habit of doing those numbers daily. It's going to help you feel really grounded to be able to look at your numbers and say, yesterday, this is what happened in my business. I can put a real pin on it because I can see the numbers. What I'm talking about in Xero is using the business snapshot. It's a new-ish part of Xero. It is in the middle of being, I was going to say tarted up, made a little bit prettier. It's not absolutely perfect right now, but it's a really good starting place because it's going to give you a snapshot of your cash, a snapshot of your profit, and a snapshot of what's going on in your balance sheet, that bit that business owners hate to go and look at, find a little bit scary. If you feel like that, talk to an accountant who can explain it to you really well so that you feel you've got an understanding of it. But go and have a look at those numbers every single day. Maybe you can take the weekend off, that's probably all right. But get into the habit of knowing your business like that so that when there are changes going on in the outside environment that you're not expecting, you can get back into that handle of the business that you really understand because you know your numbers that closely. So get intimate with your numbers, do your numbers daily. That's my first tip. My second one is plan your payments. The next 18 months is going to be a very strange time for business owners. So we're quite used to our tax payments. If you run a limited company, you pay your corporation tax once a year if you're an SME. If you're a sole trader, you're probably used to paying in January and July. So you pay your tax bill and then you pay some payments on account. What the government have done very kindly is given us a bit of time for some of these things, not for your corporation tax, but for your personal tax. But what's come along with that is that we're building ourselves up to have a bit of a nightmare in 2022. Now, if you're a sole trader, you're not going to have to make a payment in January, 31st of Jan 2021 has been wiped off the slate, being pushed to January 22. You will have to make a payment probably in July next year, but we're not quite sure. Again, it's one of these uncertain things. Really important to make some plans around when you're going to make those payments, because alongside that, if you're VAT registered and you didn't make your VAT payment for the March, April, May area, which was a time we were allowed not to make a VAT payment, you might have forgotten about this. It's coming to get you, March 21. So what I would advise you to do, a really simple spreadsheet, do it on a piece of paper if that's what feels comfortable for you. Just write out all of the months from now until, let's say, August next year, August 22. And just pop in when you're going to be making payments, because when you've got used to running a business and you know what the normal periods are for when your payments come out, you get used to that cash flow. if we're going to start messing with that, and you're not going to pay out in January, but you're going to pay out double in January 22, it is going to come and bite people in the backside. And I don't want to see businesses get through and thrive all the way up until 2022 and then get hit, and they won't have the cash coming in. There won't be those new loans to help you through it, and it's going to be really painful. So go and write out that tax payment plan. Add in if you've taken a business loan, so C-bills or the bounce back loans, if you've taken those loans out, add in when those payments restart. It's going to be May for many people. That's when those loans first came out. We've got quite comfortable in the environment as it is. Those repayments being pushed off by the government and by banks, it's not going to go on forever. So get ready for that coming back in. So that's my number two tip, is to make a plan. Number three, it's about working from home. So we just had Andy talking about making sure that you can stay connected with things like broadband. We've had conversations from Joe about chairs being comfortable, making sure you've got the right equipment around you. For a lot of us, we thought working from home might have been a short-term fix and we were all going to go back into our offices. For some of us, we've been back to our offices and we've come back home again. Now's the time to really look around your home office and say, is this an appropriate place to be running my business from for the long term? Because we don't know when we're going to go back. So let's make the assumption that our home office could be where we're going to be working from. So you need to check that your chair is right. You need to check that your desk is right. If it's not, that is a business expense. So go and spend your money making sure that you're looking after your own body, you're looking after your own business well, you're making sure your broadband is the right kind of broadband for the sort that your business needs to run from home. So if you need to go and upgrade that, if you're spending on IT right now, things like new printers, new laptops, they're all business expenses. So if you're the business owner, you can put those through your business. If you're working for somebody else or you've got employees, remind them that there are working from home allowances available. They're not massive, but they can go and claim these. So employees can go onto their own tax dashboards on the government gateway, go to your tax dashboard, and there's a button now for working from home and how to add those onto your tax code. It's just a little bit of extra you can give to your employees to help them with a little bit of extra cash if they're working from home. So in that working from home area, don't forget about spending money on your own business, investing for the future, and also looking after your employees. I know that's 3 tips. I've got one little bonus extra. It's going to be a rainy weekend, I think. I've got a really good tip for you. Go and do your tax return. It's got to be in by the 31st of January. Don't do it over Christmas time. It's horrible. Now is a great time to do it. And it's a serious point because we're being warned already by HMRC that the systems, which we're going to put extra pressure on with the Brexit changes, may feel a little bit cranky when we get to the 31st of January and 1 million people try to put the tax returns in all on the same day. Don't do it. Get the tax returns in now. If you don't do your own tax return because you give it to an accountant, great, brilliant bit of outsourcing. Give your accountant their figures right now. It will save them having a horrible Christmas too, and they'll love you for it. So that's my top bonus tip. That's me done. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you, Tory. Love that. Actually, I hadn't really thought of Brexit having an effect on tax returns. So that's thank you. That's brilliant. That's my weekend sorted. And thank you for all the other tips as well. Phenomenal. Thank you, Tory. So one of the things that feeds in, obviously, to having robust accounts and knowing your figures is making sure that your customers, your clients are paying you on time, and then so that you can pay your suppliers on time as well. Is so important, isn't it, to have positive relationships with suppliers as well as with your customers. When you have a supplier that you have a good relationship with, they will go to the nth degree to support you, and that's so vital as a small business. So Nicki, as I joked earlier, she's worth her weight in gold, but she really is. So Nicki helps people with their T's and C's and cash flow management and planning, etc. So literally, she's worth her weight in gold. So over to you, Nicki.
Thank you very much, Julia. So today I'm looking to talk to you about having the right process again. So we're going back to what other people have said about having processes in place. And now more than ever, actually, it's very important that we're very clear about who we want to do business with and how we want to do business with them, and how we're going to manage that relationship. So if I take you back right to the very beginning of it then, so you get this wonderful sales inquiry, it's very tempting to say yes to everybody, because we want to make those sales. We want those sales, we want to be boosting our bank balances as much as possible. The first caveat on that, of course, is a sale is not a sale until it's paid for. And we may not, want to treat everybody the same. So do you accept every potential customer? And we need to really think about, is that what we want to do? And if we do, are we going to treat them all the same? So one of the things I do is terms and conditions, but actually you can have different criteria for different types of clients. And this is all about understanding what sort of risk that client is. And as we move into in and out of recession, the risk of that client changes. So think about, my first tip then is to define your customer acceptance criteria. So we're not talking about your marketing avatar here. We're talking about looking at their financial ability, their willingness to pay you, their ability to pay you, and also how can you find ways to say yes to the sale. So it's not necessarily about saying no, but it's about saying that actually giving everybody credit is probably not the right thing to do. You might say, actually, this is a high risk customer, and therefore I'm happy to do the sale, but you've got to pay me up front. And then there might be another customer that you say, well, actually, I'm happy to issue my standard credit terms. And there might be yet another one who's actually a really good opportunity for you, and you think they're very safe. So actually, you're prepared to give them extended terms to get them onto a better deal. So you need to think about your types of customers you want to deal with and what your acceptance criteria will be for them. So what will allow you to safely do business with them? Which leads me on to my next tip, which is to make sure actually that you really know who you're doing business with. And there's a whole raft of due diligence things that you can do. The biggest and most important tip, though, is to get all that right information from that client. So I have a template that people can use, which is an account sort of application or information form. But very often I come across people when I'm doing credit control for them, for instance, and I go into their Xero and they've got a name and an email address, or a name and a phone number, or they've got, the business name is wrong in Xero, so it's not quite the right business name, it's not the right legal name. So actually this form allows you to make sure you've got all of the right information. So the legal name, the trading name, potentially things like, if you're dealing with a bigger business, the person that's buying from you might not be the person responsible for paying you. It's making sure you've got that right information, so you know who you're to talk to when they're paying, you want to get paid. And things like, do they have set payment run times? Because it's all very well you saying, oh, my payment terms are 7 days, but if they only ever make a payment run at the end of every month, you need to factor that in when you're then looking at cash flow and whether you actually want to do business with them. So that leads you back to your acceptance criteria. So with a form like this, you can either give it to the client and ask the client to fill it in, or use it as a checklist for you while you're having conversations with them. But get all of that information in place before you start actually sending services and goods out the door. And then finally, my final tip for today is about having a written, and I mean written, process for managing late payments. A lot of us do it on the fly. So we look at our bank balance, we look at potentially the outstanding invoices and think, oh, I really need to do something about this. And so we start randomly calling people, or sending out emails, or using the reminder letters out of our account management system. You really need to have some structure around that so that you have a clear idea of what stage in the process each of your outstanding invoices are in. So you need to decide, how are you going to contact your customers? How are you going to communicate with them, and how often? And then think about things like, what will be the penalties for late payment? So what are you going to say to clients? So at what point do you put them on stop, say, or suspend any further services? And also, if you do all of this stuff and you are not successful, what are your next steps? So is this something that you want to take on yourself? So going through the small claims court. Do you want to use the services of a reputable debt collections agency? And I say reputable because I know there's somebody on the call that is a really good friend of mine who's really reputable, so that's good. Or is it something that actually, do you think the value to effort ratio is not worth it, and therefore it's going to be written off, and therefore you need to think about your bad debts and your procedures there. So it's having that clear process for managing those late payments. Okay, so I'll just recap. Define your customer acceptance criteria. Don't necessarily have to treat everybody the same. Know your customer, so gather all the right information at the beginning of the relationship so that you can manage that relationship well going forward, and have a clear written process for managing late payments, and how you're going to deal with it right from first call right through to any remedial action you might have to take. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Nicki. Thank you. Invaluable as always. Thank you so much. Lots of value there. And I've put a link to the second point into the chat as well, so people can pick that up. And Carolyne now is going to help those people on the call who have staff and employees as to how to navigate the next period of time.
Thanks, Julia. So good afternoon, everybody. So I've got actually 4 points, but one of them is not my point. It's going back to what Tory said about knowing your numbers. You absolutely have to know your numbers. You should be able to access that information on a daily basis so that you know where you stand, so that with the moment, with furlough payments, with thinking about redundancies, you know exactly what buffer you've got and how soon you need to make that decision, really. Furlough. So my second point, which came out, I think, is about motivating staff. Motivating staff at the moment is really back to basics. It's pay them on time what they are due. If you are doing any processes, be it redundancy, furlough, disciplinaries, make sure you are following the correct legal processes. Staff are reassured by seeing you doing the right thing. If you start trying to make it up, that is what is going to worry them and demotivate them. Okay, so make sure you're doing the right thing and getting the right HR advice for this. Okay, use furlough. You absolutely can use furlough. Even if you're going to do redundancies, you can use furlough, put people on furlough for the consultation period. You cannot use furlough for any notice periods whatsoever, whether you've given somebody notice or whether they've given you notice. If they've resigned, you still can't use it for any notice periods from the 1st of December. If it's in November, you can still claim. Any period after the 1st of December, even if it started in November, cannot be claimed for. Again, this is a really easy one for the furlough, for the HMRC to check on, because they will just see when you've issued them with the P45 and work backwards and go, P45 was issued end of December. Did they claim for this person in December? They shouldn't have. And then you'll have to pay that money back. So, either way, you're going to get caught. And if you're really unlucky, that might trigger an audit and a fine. So you just do it the right way to start off with, okay? You can use it for a consultation period. The other thing is that if you have any other staff issues going on at the moment, if there was anything that happened just before lockdown happened, or has happened since we've gone into flexible furlough and lockdown now, deal with it now. Don't put it off until we come out of lockdown. If it's a disciplinary offence, talk to somebody to at least have a plan of action, even if you don't want to do anything until December or even January. Who knows when this lockdown is going to end? But to get it sorted out now, don't put it off, because you will have no case against somebody if you say in 3 months' time, oh, yeah, I want to discipline you for that thing that happened before, back in November, back on the 1st of November. It's just, you're not going to be able to dismiss anybody, even if it was a gross misconduct issue. The delay is too much. We can do a lot during lockdown on Zoom. We've been using Zoom for lots of meetings during the first lockdown, and now going on as people are shielding as well. There is no reason to put it off, and it's going to undermine your ability as the employer to deal with it for what the business needs. That's the thing. So keep using, even though it's lockdown or even if they're doing flexible furlough, still manage them as if you were having to deal with them face to face every day. Okay. Deal with the issues before they escalate, get it sorted out, and make sure you're talking to a proper HR advisor, not your mate or your dad or whoever it is, your brother's mother's girlfriend, boyfriend, sister. Just get the right advice. Make sure you're doing it. You can talk to ACAS if you want to. ACAS are not really set up properly for employers. They're not very sympathetic, but there are lots of HR advisors out there, obviously us, and we have free advice at the beginning, but just make sure you get the right information to deal with it now and don't put it off until later. That's it. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you. Just to reiterate, Caroline and her team are happy to help people. If you do have a specific issue you want to talk through, then do make contact with Caroline. Caroline, if you'd like to put your contact details out so that all the panelists into the chat, please do. But moving now on to what underpins all of this, and it's got to be our mindset. It's got to be our attitude, and no one better at all than George Swift to help us by sharing some tips as to how to keep all this into context and perspective. So over to George.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Good to be here again, Julia. Good to see everyone else here. Yeah, great stuff as always. I'm normally up front, aren't I? So it's nice to be bringing it home this time around. I'm going to have a general discussion. I'm going to give you my 3 points at the end, but I just want to contextualise it a little bit. Julia, you touched on this at the beginning, but I just want to reiterate the numbers again that you were talking about, because this is something I'm really, really passionate about. Is you know, I see myself, I take on that role and responsibility of being an ambassador for small business owners. You know, we've got 70 plus members, you know, over half this panel in my group right now. I've looked at the attendees, and about half those names there, if not more, were either are now in my current group or they have been in the group. And it's just so nice to see so many of the people that, you know, we've connected with and we've had that impact on, either still be in our club or still be present in our community, which I really love. So welcome everybody, whether you're on the panel or whether you're on the attendees. If you know me, I love you very much. So here's some things to put in context, because I tell you now, we are in tough times. And, you know, sometimes I get accused of being the harbinger of doom and stuff like that, which is interesting, because I am ultimately here to motivate, inspire, and whatever, but I am here to put a rocket up business owners' arses and to stir up some fight in them, to fight for themselves and to fight for each other. And this battle, if I can call it a battle, it's not over yet. As Julia says, it's going to get tougher, I believe. Hopefully things will iron out a bit, you know, and it won't be quite so up and down. But here's the thing I want you to understand: if you're a business owner and you're feeling a little bit stressed, a little bit struggling, especially if you're a business owner that feels a little bit like you might be on your own. As Julia says, 6 million businesses in the UK right now. All right, put that in perspective. 6 million businesses in the UK, 67 million people. That's including all the pensioners and the children and everything else. 5.94 million, that's 99% of them are small businesses. In other words, they have less than 50 employees. 48% of all UK employment is actually done by small business owners, under 48 employee business owners. We contribute to half of the workforce in the UK. 36% of all UK revenues come through small businesses, the same unit, under 40 employees. That's 1.6 trillion pounds come through our hands. We massively contribute 36% to the UK revenue, and 4.6 million of those are one-man bands. Okay, so even if you're sitting there on your own thinking, but it's just little old me, I don't really contribute much, it's just my small business, you are part of something phenomenal. You are part of something that is huge. And I tell you what, we forget sometimes just what we make, what we don't have in size as small business owners, we make up for in numbers. And we are growing fast. I mean, Julie mentioned the numbers, 72% growth in small businesses since 2000. So between 2000 and 2020, with rate, there's 2.5 million more of us, okay? And that's not new businesses, because obviously some businesses have gone. That's 2.5 million more businesses in 2020 than we had in 2000s. And right now, small businesses are one of those demographics that are being asked to pay a massive price for the actions that our governments are taking right now. And therefore, it's never been more important that we understand that we are not alone. We understand that we are part of something so much bigger, that we understand our responsibility to our own business, to ourselves, but also to the wider small business community. It's so important that we come together, whether it's through, BBB, we've been going 10 years, whether it's through Julia, whether it's through any of the groups of the people that are on here right now. If it's small groups or big groups, broad groups, network, it's so important to understand that it's never been more important that we come together and realize that we need to unite as a united force as we confront this common foe, right? The foe that we all face, which is the economy, restrictions to business. For the first time, I think, maybe in history, is it? I don't know. Small businesses have been literally restricted from being able to do business. We no longer have the right, some businesses in this country, to do trade, right? And that's an unprecedented thing for any society to face. And it's a huge price that we're being asked to pay. I believe what we're doing is, I love a good dust up, I love a good bit of competition. But even I, the old fossil that I am, living in the old ways, understand that we are definitely moving into an era of collaboration. We're moving away from that competition. Obviously, we're going to compete for funds, and it's fair competition, and that's always going to be out there. But to understand that actually my enemy is not my competition. Our common enemy is the economy. Our common enemy is restrictions that are being placed on us as small business owners. And when we realize, in that great saying that I've always loved, right, and often misquote, and let's see if it comes out right this time, which is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think I think I've said it right that time. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? No, yeah, that's right. No, I'll get it right the first time and screw it the second time, right? Damn, I should have quit while I was ahead, right? 1 in 10 people you meet on the street runs a small business, on average. 1 in 10 people. When you go to the supermarket, 1 in 10 people you meet runs a small business owner. We don't think like that, right? We think we're small. Many of us think we're inconsequential, right? 1 in 10 of us run a small business, okay? And I think it's never been more important that we need each other to be successful. And the reason we need each other to be successful is actually, I think we're facing two potential futures here, right? And one of those futures is where small businesses start to shrink and we start to lose more and more small businesses, and big mega global corporations have a stronger hold over society and community. I'm massively critical of a lot of big mega global companies, the way they treat the planet, the way they treat their employees, the way they treat us as their clients. And I look at small business owners and I look at how they treat the world and how they treat their clients and what they're doing in constantly trying to contribute back to society and make society a better place. And I've said it before and here, and I've said it many times before, and I'm going to say it again, big mega global corporations dominate society, right? They dominate from the top down. Whereas actually small businesses, we are on the ground, we are the fabric of society, and we need to exert ourselves upwards in society. And I believe society without small business entrepreneurism, society without an increasing number of small businesses being made like we have done over the last 20 years, I think it's a society that is worse for it. And I think as small business owners, we owe it to ourselves to make sure that we survive. We owe it to each other to make sure that we survive. We owe it to our whole business community that we encourage more people into entrepreneurism. I believe the two faults are, one is less small businesses and more global mega corporations dominating us. The other one, I believe, is almost going backwards a little bit in society to where we have many, many, many more small business entrepreneurs like we did pre-industrial revolution. We had I say the accountant, that's definitely today, right? But, we had, the tinker, the tailor, and we had everyone back then was a small business owner. And I think we need to go back to more of that, where small business owners take up their place in society and we realize we are contributing hugely to society. And therefore, it's so important that we need to succeed, because I think at that fault that we are facing now, one of those brings in, I believe, a world that just isn't as good as we would want, and it's not the one that we want to step into. And the other one is a new era of entrepreneurism, and it's something I've been really passionately speaking about, and one that I think collectively we need to will into existence. Is this one where we have more small businesses, and more small businesses are successful, exerting the positivity that they create in the world out into society, and I think we're all going to benefit from that. And I think really to kind of sum this up, and I suppose to finish this, I guess what I want to do is almost put out a thank you, I think, to all small businesses out there who are out there right now contributing to other small businesses. You know, so many small businesses are service-based businesses. Many of those serve other small businesses. I look at the panel in front of me, you know, and the client bases of the people in front of me. Pretty much most of those are other small businesses. And I think it's so important that, you know, that when I look at the faces in front of me and the people in my club and everything else, the way we've stepped up during this period, even though we've been under unprecedented pressures ourselves in our businesses, but the way that we've stepped up to support other fellow small business owners, I think is, again, unprecedented. And I think that's the power and the beauty of what we've seen over the last 7-8 months. And I think if you look at those aspects of society, you know, how we've come together, how we've supported each other, how we've stepped up and start to genuinely care about other small business owners. If we take that and continue to multiply that and magnify that moving into the future, I think the world is just going to be a much, much, much better place. So obviously, many people on this panel right now, I know, contribute hugely back. Many I know personally have massively stepped up to their own detriment. I'm really interested in what Joe said about taking care of yourself and stuff like that. And I've seen many business owners almost to their own detriment serving. And I think it's time to listen to Joe and to listen to the other people on it, Olly and everyone else, to make sure that we regroup, make sure that we nurture ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, make sure we build the stabilities in place in our own lives, in our families and in our businesses. And I think it's time to club together, and it's time to lock arms and go out there and fight again. So take care of yourself, regroup, make sure you're fit and healthy, because I tell you now, it's not over yet. We need you, you need you. And it's so important that not only do we survive, we must become more successful. My 3 top tips to finish on is really simple. You must be successful. You must be successful. You must be successful. It's not about surviving. It's not about getting through. You must be successful, because when you're successful, you're better, your clients are better, and the whole of us as a business community are better. And guess what? Society is better as well. So you owe it to us. Be successful. I overran, but hey, sorry.
Thank you, George. Wow. Oof, goodness. We have overrun. And if any of the panel would like to put their biggest takeaways into the chat, please do. I am conscious of the time, but I think that what we've given is so valuable. But I think what's really come out of this whole session, and I'd just like to thank the panelists all again and for everybody for being on this journey with us. But what's really come out is that we are all important, individually and collectively. And this is the whole ethos of Stronger Together. I'm so glad I started this, and I'm starting to be quite emotional. Just going to have a deep breath. But it's important to protect ourselves, because we are all important. We need to protect ourselves physically, mentally, and emotionally, because when you do protect yourself, then you will help yourself and enable yourself to be true to yourself and to your purpose. And as small business owners, we do all want to do so much good out there. It means that we can reduce that overwhelm and that fear. And when you do that, then it enables you to be more creative, more innovative, because one thing we do all have as business owners is the ability to be agile and to tweak a direction if we need to. But we can all achieve this. It's so important to plan. That's what's really come out of this. Olly's talking about the marathon, having those checkpoints in your plan, have those checkpoints. Celebrate it when you do achieve those things, because that will feed into the overall positivity and that will feed into productivity. But basically, all of this means that we do all have within us the ability to thrive through whatever is thrown at us in the next few months. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us and for being part of this. And we will see you again very, very soon. So you take care and enjoy the rest of your day.